Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in Birmingham in the West Midlands. Another lovely week to be at home. I know that you are a long time now home parents, educating your children and looking after your children, and things can get difficult at times. We do have groups for this. If you want to find out more about other support and things happening out there with Parent Lockdown Group, you'll be able to contact us on that. If you want to contact Unity FM, and they will send you our details, Approachable Parenting, or contact us directly. My name is Kathleen, as you know, and I'm with you for the next hour. Inshallah, we've got a lovely program set up this evening for you, because today we're going to be talking about infant mental health, as this week is Infant Mental Health Week. Infant Mental Health Awareness Week. I'm not too sure if you're aware of what does that mean and the importance of mental health and looking after our infants the whole way from birth right up, or even before birth. And actually, to discuss this and discuss it in more detail, I've got a lovely person in front of me that you will enjoy listening to. Mashallah, she's an expert in this field. She is a consultant clinical psychologist, Dr. Cathy Coombs. And I'd like to welcome you, Cathy, to our radio show this afternoon. Welcome to you. How are you, Cathy?
I'm good. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for inviting me to the show.
You're welcome. It's so nice having you here. And I know you're such a busy person, and I feel just so lucky to be able to get you onto the show this evening and have you here with me, indeed, discussing this lovely topic that I'm passionate about, and I know a lot of our listeners are passionate about, and a lot of our listeners maybe have concerns or worried over this lockdown period. And this information that you're going to tell them this evening will be wonderful indeed to educate them and help them to relieve their anxieties and know what to do in supporting their children around mental health. So it's Infant Mental Health Week. We have problems trying to explain mental health to adults and how to look after their health. So when we're talking about infant mental health, what would we be thinking about? What does that look like, infant mental health?
So if I can explain, Kathleen, infant mental health, it describes when we're thinking about a baby's social and their emotional well-being, and also the kind of development of a child's the foundations that are laid in the earliest years that kind of promote good functioning and good mental health and well-being in later life. And today, thank you for being able to offer us this opportunity to promote and raise raise awareness of the importance of infant mental health. What we probably need to think about is actually linking infant mental health with parent mental health, because they go together. They're so interlinked. We're thinking about when things are going well for babies and for the parents, they both benefit and mutually thrive.
That is so true, isn't it? That they're very much interlinked, and you can't really separate them. But even looking at maternal mental health, and I know you branch over both areas indeed in what you do, it's difficult to get that message across. We have had lots of anxieties, especially over COVID, around with parents not knowing what's happening, what's going on, and what to expect when they go into delivery and when they take baby home. So they often think about, I suppose, their own mental health, but I wonder, do they think about how they can improve their infant's mental health at that stage? What and how could they do it? And I know this year there's a big campaign around looking after infant mental health. So maybe we can link into that, the vision of what's happening this week in relation to infant mental health and what's happening to help parents to increase their knowledge.
Yes, of course. Thank you. So we talk about the importance of the first 1001 days, and what we mean by that is from conception and all through pregnancy up until the age of a child is 2. These are what we mean by the kind of critical days, the first 1001 days, and this is where the foundation for the baby's well-being is laid. And you're right to think about, well, what can parents do? So the most important thing we think about is this begins before birth. This begins this process of helping a baby to have a healthy development. When a mum feels supported in pregnancy, so she needs to have her physical care but also her emotional support to be cared for, so that she can stay healthy, stay calm, stay relaxed. And we know that this is what promotes the healthy brain development for the baby. And it's literally, a baby's brain is built to the neural pathways, and all the connections in the baby's brain are laid down during pregnancy and then going forward as the baby grows. So we want women to make sure they access care, make sure that they have the support of close family, and that they build trusting relationships with professionals, so that they can be supported the best through their pregnancy, and that will help set the foundations for their baby's future well-being as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You talk about brain development and brain facts, because we spoke about that previously on shows over the years, and I still get messages from our parents, and they're still thinking that, what does a baby understand? A baby just needs to be fed, then burped, then put down to sleep, and have the nappies changed, and that's all you do. That's all what it's about. Why do nothing else? Nothing else matters. You're smiling. I can see that. There.
I guess that you're right. That sometimes people do think that, but that's, I wish, you know, we could get the message out there around how sensitive babies are to emotions and to the kind of world around them, and how their brain isn't yet at a stage where they can regulate their emotions on their own. So baby relies on the parents to try and tune into their feelings, and particularly if they're having upset or distressed or unwell or just not sure what's going on. They need the parent to kind of really try and understand and feed back through to the child that understanding and that emotional support. It might be through tone of voice. It's really important that babies can see their parents' faces, that they feel held, that they're close to a trusted adult, that they feel loved and cared for. And then if they're having distress, it's the adult that helps the child learn to manage difficult feelings and distressing feelings. So they really are kind of absorbing everything around them in their environment, in their family, in their community, in their culture, and they rely so much on the parents and the trusted caregivers to kind of help them with that difficult process.
Then there'll be parents that will say, especially I think grandparents, and may come in and say, but you're spoiling the baby, you're picking up the baby, and every time baby cries, that's spoiling the baby. I think it's quite hard to get that message across, that this is not spoiling the baby.
You can't, yeah, you're right, Catherine, you can't spoil a baby with love. And a baby needs that. They thrive when they're in a positive relationship with trusted adults. They need to just have sensitive, attuned caregiving. What I mean by that is when parents are loving, reliable, and actually able to respond to the baby. It's a trap really to fall into if you think a baby's going to be spoilt, or they're somewhere being naughty or manipulative. A baby can't manage the feelings on their own. They need that parent to kind of help support them and to process the difficult emotions on their behalf, really, and kind of manage that for them. So you definitely can't spoil a baby, but they need simple things, that close touch, skin to skin contact, possibly eye contact, the voice, to just know that parents nearby, to be held and loved and cuddled. Those things aren't going to spoil a baby. They're what they need and what they thrive on.
And is this just immediately when they're babies and very young that they thrive on this, that this is important at this stage? Or is this something that for them as growing up and children later on, we hear a lot of information now talking about baby brains and the importance of that. So is that just for early years, I'm trying to ask, or is it for later on?
It's lifelong, but obviously it starts, so as you pointed out, it starts in the womb when parents can start to bond with their baby by talking to the baby in the womb, or by stroking and singing to their baby in the womb. Those interactions set the future kind of landscape, really. So when baby's born, the minute by minute and day to day kind of experiences that the baby has, that shapes their relationships, for their template, really, of what they expect relationships and how they look to relate to others. So that process begins before birth, carries on when a baby's born, but is lifelong.
And this, I presume, then is the path, like putting down foundations of a path for them, for their lives, for how they grow and how they lead their lives, how they make friendships, how they bond with others, what they want to achieve maybe later on in life.
Of course, yes, because the first relationship with the parent is what we hope forms the kind of secure attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from the basis of having a secure attachment with a trusted, close parent. And that's how children then, babies and young children feel safe to explore their environment. And in this way, they're supported to grow, to learn, to thrive. And as you say, it's kind of how they learn to be in relationship with other people outside their family. It sets them up to know how to kind of manage relationships beyond the family.
Great. So it is really important when we're talking about secure attachment, and we're talking this week about infant mental health. It is really important for us to get that message across to our listeners, who can spread this message to their friends, to their families, to their sister-in-laws, whoever is listening in. We need to get this message across, that this is so important. And actually probably not just our women listening in, I think our dads and our males listening in as well need to spread this message across. So there's a role there for men as well in infant mental health.
Of course, because if we think about it, when we think of a baby, we think about them being in the relationship with usually mother, but that relationship between parent and infant needs the support of father and then extended family, close family, neighbours, friends. So it's like a community. We use that phrase, don't we? It takes a village to raise a child. Mm-hmm. So that sense of connection and support and community and culture around a child is, dads have a very important role in that. Thank you.
So probably, if we're talking about Birmingham, it takes a city to raise a child.
It does.
When we look at all this, the organisations that are involved and all the help and support that is out there that can help people and support people in doing this and in getting that secure attachment. I'm going back to Dad's role again, because we as a community and as communities, we're often overlooking the importance of dads, and sometimes dads feel that they're pushed out because this is the mother's terrain, and that's culturally too. And sometimes the mum takes kind of control of everything, and it's like our kitchen. She wants to keep our kitchen spick and span, so keeping babies, especially in the early years. But it could also be because she's breastfeeding, and it's actually she's in contact more with the baby than dads, and dads feel they don't always have that important role. So I know we've been trying to get dads in on our programs and more involved, and actually talking to mums about this and saying, don't just give dads the message up, because that is what we're finding, that when mums come and say to dads, yes, you need to bond with your baby, go change their nappy, something like this. So you recommend that skin to skin with dads as well, and increasing that bond and having that fun time with dads?
Absolutely. And just one of the things I recommend when I'm working with parents is that idea of just soothing, calming breathing. So if a mom or a dad can actually hold baby to their heart, to their chest, and then tune in to the baby's breath, this will help the baby to regulate their heartbeat and their breathing, to feel safe, to listen to the baby, to the mum or dad's heartbeat. It's that kind of, it reminds them of being in the womb, and that actually gives them the safety and the security, that growing feeling of attachment and bonding. That all happens when they're held. And as I say, young babies don't need lots of toys, they just need their secure adult, their close parent figure, and lots of love.
That's good to know, because sometimes parents can spend a lot of money too on toys, or feel that they're missing out if they don't have toys for children to engage in activities. But you're saying it's that contact, it's that personal contact, that one-to-one with either the mum or the dad or both in there, and having that time, that quality and time, that relationship, building that relationship, getting to know each other.
Absolutely, yeah. It's things like the tone of voice, singing, gentle touch, rocking, swaying, all those things. That's what a baby needs. A baby is born ready to relate to humans. That's what they seek, that social connection. They're social babies. They seek that connection from eye contact, from familiar sounds, because babies will recognize parents' voices from having heard them in the womb. So they come out and seek they want to see the mother's face and tune in to the mother's voice and being held. Yeah.
So then are babies then similar, or are they different in how they have temperaments, etc.? How can we nurture them to have a good nature? Is there a way we can do that?
I think you're raising a really good point here. It's really important that actually parents get to know their baby. That transition to parenthood, we all have that idea of what will our baby be like, and that's really important. But actually when baby arrives, we encourage parents to really tune in to the baby and that baby's temperament, because all babies are unique. We don't want to sort of compare babies to other babies or different stages that other babies are doing, and just really get to know your baby, get to know the sort of routines that work for you and for your baby. Research lets us know that babies have different temperaments. So some babies are sort of slow to warm up, and some babies are kind of ready and active and on the go very quickly from the off sort of thing. So it's actually helping parents to tune into their own baby's unique temperament, and just getting just following the baby's lead, really taking the cue from the baby. A baby will let you know when they're ready to play, when they're ready to interact, when they're ready to learn, but they'll also let you know by subtle signals that they need a rest, that they're tired, or that there's sort of too much busyness going on and they might just need some quiet time. So we talk about engagement and disengagement cues. So we help parents to tune in to their baby's cues, to let them know what the baby needs from them at that moment in time, because it will change at different points in time.
And is there some cues that parents really need to pick up on that are there? They should know about this, they should be alert about this?
So some of the things, like when the ones we would expect when a baby's cooing, babbling, when they're reaching towards the parent, when they may be kind of moving their arms and legs in a kind of nice way, in an excited way. They'll look relaxed. They'll be looking to the parent, their eyes will be wide and bright. Those are what we call the engagement cues, and that's when your baby wants you to talk to them, to play with them, to sing to them. But if a baby is kind of starting to show a sad face, or look away, or pull away, or they might start to kind of arch their back, or kind of just look a little bit frowny, or sad, so their eyes a little bit less bright, then it may just be that it could be that they're tired, it could be that they need a feed or something, but sometimes they just need a pause, they just need some quiet time, a rest from stimulation, and then they can come back and be busy again. But the stimulation can kind of be overwhelming, and so we help parents really tune in to when their baby's telling them that they need a rest and a bit of a slower pace.
So that's important, that parents know that they should be, yes, time for play, but also time for rest. So, and tuning into when is the correct times to do that. And it's good that you mentioned that, because sometimes if parents have had more than one child, they're often comparing the new baby to the other children, and think that they're going to be the same.
No, so that every baby will be unique. Although babies have a kind of a genetic inheritance, and there may be some similarities in families, that baby's journey and experience will be unique to them, and what happens in their environment will kind of be very individual to that baby. And so, we ask parents to trust their instincts and to kind of follow the baby's lead, and to kind of just really tune in and get to know this baby, whether it's your first or later baby.
So interesting, isn't it? All of this, I find it just fascinating, and it's wonderful having you here with us today, Cathy, to explain it all to us about the importance of tuning into babies and understanding babies and being aware of babies. And I'm sure there's lots of psychological reports and papers and on all of this, on brain function and what helps brain function. But for lots of parents listening in, it might be the first time for them to even think about something like this, and think about the importance, and think about how are they spending time with their baby, what are they doing, what activities are they doing there, how they're interacting, how they're cuddling with babies. And if they've had a few children at home, especially nowadays in lockdown, where you've got your children, maybe your toddler, maybe your school-going children, also you're trying to do work with them. They may not have that sufficient time to be able to spend that with, if it was with a new baby. If it was their first baby, it'd be easier than with having the extended family, because now they're on top of everything else. They're teaching their children as well, so they're in another role. So we're being stretched. Everybody has been stretched indeed in this. So is there any kind of tips that you could give parents around that, around helping them to dedicate some time to their babies, indeed, so that they don't feel guilty at the end of the day?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously things are really challenging, aren't they, with the COVID crisis? And we know that this is adding a lot of strain to kind of young children and their parents. I guess for me, one of the most important things is to try and help a parent think about how they're feeling and how they're coping. And we need parents to feel that their own emotional needs and their own self-care is at its best, really, because we ask so much of them. It's the hardest job in the world, isn't it, to be a parent? The best job, but one of the, the hardest. And so I guess I urge parents to really think about how they get the balance between what they need to keep themselves going so that they can meet their children's needs, and to ask for help and to seek support if they're having concerns about how they're managing. I know it's harder at the moment to kind of have support from outside of the family, but there's some really helpful websites and information, and perhaps at the end of this I can somehow share some information for you to share with listeners if they want to kind of look up links for different websites. But yes, that self-care and just staying calm and knowing how your own emotional kind of thermometer is, really, because if a baby is getting distressed and a parent's getting kind of anxious or stressed themselves, it'll become harder to sort of soothe the baby. We need parents to kind of feel they're able to regulate their own emotions, to then be able to have the availability to meet the baby's emotional needs.
Wonderful, thank you. That explains very, very well. I know, Cathy, this week is a really busy week for you. We have the Infant Mental Health campaign this week, and I know you're involved in that. And people are hearing about infant mental health, hopefully, over the internet, over different platforms of what's going on. Where would people go to for support? What would they do? Where could they attend or go to? Or who should be their first point of contact?
So the first point of contact I'd recommend is during pregnancy is obviously your midwife, and when your baby's been after 6 weeks old, your health visitor or GP. Obviously they're the people that know you well and can provide the care that's right for you. If people want to kind of learn more about some of the things we've been talking about, Kathleen, there's the app that you and I both recommend to parents called Baby Buddy app. It's a free app. It's got amazing information, lots of video information, really helpful. You can type in questions and get answers. You can get information all through your pregnancy and when your child's young to help you. There's also some really lovely videos, very short videos that people can watch on the Association for Infant Mental Health, and that's a series of resources for parents called Getting to Know Your Baby, and there's videos about sleep states and engagement and helping your baby to soothe and to get to sleep, dealing with crying, those kind of things. For the campaign, so the campaign, I should have said, it's called 2020 Vision, and this year we're looking at the world, seeing the world through the baby's eyes. And so if people want to look up, if they Google hashtag IMHAW 2020, that's Infant Mental Health Awareness Week 2020, or they can Google 1001 Days, which will give it all so information about baby brain development and what is infant mental health and why it matters. All those, there's some really exciting kind of videos and articles and links and things that people can access. And I think I was hoping that I could maybe provide some links for your website, the Approachable Parenting, as a follow-up to this conversation, where I can send some information if people want to kind of look on that as well.
Brilliant, mashallah. There's a lot going on. There's a lot happening this week with all this information out there for people. And I know the Baby Buddy app that you mentioned. So if listeners, you're tuned into this, please go on to our Facebook page or Instagram page. You'll get it in different languages. Do download it and access all that information that is there for free. Wow, 300 videos for free. So it's a really great resource for people and will help in this. And then Cathy also mentioned some other things that are happening. There's a lot happening actually in social media this week, and the Infant Mental Health Organisation are doing things, and so much going on. I think people will, if they go on social media, they will find a lot of information, useful resources there, useful tips for them indeed to link in. And of course, if they're worried in the meantime, yes, you mentioned, thank you for reminding our listeners of that, of their midwives, of their health visitors, their GP. All the services are working. NHS, everybody is working as usual to access these services, and everybody is there offering support and help. Wonderful. Listeners, after commercial break, we are coming back to another guest, still talking about infant mental health. So do tune into us after the commercial break, and you will be inspired again hearing about the importance of infant mental health. Thank you so much, Cathy, for coming on the show, for giving up your time. I know you're very, very busy, and we were so lucky to have you. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in Birmingham and 105.1 in London. And welcome back after that commercial break. My name is Kathleen, and as you know, we had a lovely first section of today's session with Dr. Cathy Coombs, and we spoke a lot about infant mental health and types, and you had lots of information, lots of tips there, which we're grateful for. And as promised, we have a special guest joining us for the second half of the show, and we are welcoming Jeremy Gunson, who is a specialist in this area, working with Muslim families as well, and has lots of knowledge. And I'm really looking forward to our discussions with him and the approaches that he's taking in working with Muslim communities and how he's approached this. Welcome, Jeremy, to this afternoon's show. How are you?
Thank you very much, Kathleen. I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Great. It's good to see you. I'm actually seeing you, but I know our listeners are not seeing you. So it's lovely to see you and see you healthy there in front of me and smiling.
Likewise, Kathleen. And thank you very much for asking me to come. I should just clarify something.
Yeah.
Who I am.
Yes, please do. Please do.
You introduced me as a specialist. I trained as a child and adolescent psychoanalytic psychotherapist at the Tavistock Clinic in London. Part of that training, the initial part of that training involves something called an infant observation, where we look at a baby on a weekly basis over 2 years in order to look and think about early emotional development in as much detail as possible. And then we go on to have quite an extended training beyond that as far as our clinical work is concerned, and that takes another 4 years. Well, 4 years now, but when I was doing it, it was 6, and that because things were not quite as organised. And the training also includes things like, for the Tavistock Clinic at least, attending things like the infant mental health workshop, which is extremely interesting. And that, so I guess I need to also think about a starting point in our conversation, and what particular things in that sense would be good to think about. I guess from my point of view, it's thinking about the experience of becoming a parent is extremely important, and how parents often feel as if they need to be perfect, and it goes along with having aspirations for our children, that we want the best for them in life, and so it's beholden upon us in order to be able to facilitate that as much as possible. But being at the beginning of something is extremely difficult, just being a learner, a novice, so that everything is there in front of you, almost like a blank canvas. And the difficulty is that a blank canvas can also be very intimidating, as the artists will often say. And so thinking about what you might then put on that canvas from an artist's perspective is something that can become can become quite disabling in some ways. So for parents, then thinking about how their children are growing is very naturally a continuing concern from infancy all the way through, actually. And in infancy, I guess the real important message that I would like to get across is something that Donald Winnicott, who was a famous psychoanalyst and psychiatrist in the 1960s, I think it was, he caused a great controversy when he said that he didn't think there was anything called a baby, as if babies didn't really exist. Actually, he was misquoted. And what he was actually saying was that there's no such thing as a baby without a parent, so that parents and infants go together. You can't be an infant without a parent, and you can't be a parent without an infant. And that's what he was also, what he was attempting to put across was that really, as far as infants are concerned, you just need to be good enough as a parent. And that can be very liberating for some parents, because that's kind of sense of doing things absolutely right, can be, just like the artist in front of the blank canvas, quite disabling.
That is so important, isn't it? Because the infants do not know any other parents. So how are they going to compare you? Whereas parents are often comparing themselves to books that gives perfect examples, and they feel they have to do this. And actually, if we're looking at COVID-19, where they have to educate their children now at home, and they're comparing themselves against teachers and all the work that's been sent home from school, and feeling inadequate because they are not doing at the same level. A lot of them, I know, they've come back to us saying we're not doing the same level as teachers, but they're not qualified teachers in the first place. So and they're really hard on themselves.
Absolutely, and there's lots of different kinds of learning. So parents in that sense need to appreciate the fact that they're teaching their children absolutely everything in all that they do. That there's nothing gratuitous in anything that's going on. Infants particularly will often repeat things in spite of perhaps being told that they shouldn't do something. And it's important for parents to understand in that sense that infants need to know for sure about things. They test things out to find out whether that's, the integrity of something. I'm struggling with my language there. And language is so important in everything that we do. So particularly, I mean, babies in that sense, it's a hang on to your hat kind of experience, because development is so strong, particularly in infancy, because growth in that sense is so rapid. There are only two periods in our lives in which we grow so strongly. The first is in infancy and the second is in adolescence. And the kind of conditions that exist in both are matched by their behaviour. So some infants at times can appear to be extremely wise in some things that they say. And you think, my goodness, did that really come from you? And then in adolescence, of course, it's well known that they're vulnerable to collapse and they can behave like infants. And it's important as well from, and this is wandering off a little bit, but how things in infancy, if there are difficulties, if there are adversities in infancy, then they will tend to reappear and be expressed in adolescence. And adolescence in that sense can represent a time in which things that did not go so well in infancy can be repaired, and things can be very different from the trajectory that those children may have taken. But returning to infant, sorry.
I was just going to say that how important this is, what you're saying, because we over and over and over again try to get across to our parents the importance of parenting programs from pregnancy and pregnancy beyond pregnancy, to see the early years and the building that attachment, the attunement is all what you're talking about, and that brain development there. But as I was mentioning with Cathy in the first part of the show, that our parents don't always see this as an important stage. They think that this stage, you know, children only, or babies need to be breastfed, changed and put down, but that, and just what you were saying there about the teenage years and how it can come back again, it's really relevant on this show to get those messages across to our parents that are listening in about the importance of the early years. So
absolutely, yeah. I think that yeah, that's a wonderful prompt. I can't say it's Kathleen, because yeah, I think that traditionally people have tended to refer to infants as being fairly inanimate, and that personality is acquired in some kind of way when they become more animate and ambulant, so that when they start to express themselves in ways that adults in that sense can begin to make sense of. But actually the emotional development begins in utero, so that when the baby is at full term, then their senses, their basic sensory capacities in that sense have actually started, so that they can hear and they can see, and they get insights into what's going on in the outside world through mum's hormonal transmission. So they get a kind of taste, literally, of what things might be like for mum. Then their capacities in that sense, they're very sophisticated little beings. So they're able to recognize their mums by sound and smell within minutes of birth. And then they are immediately into the world of relationships, where, of course, they're extremely dependent. So they often will express that stress, and in very ordinary ways, but carrying an emotional charge, which reflects the fact for them that they don't really know what's going on. And as such, it's difficult to know whether this pain in my tummy, which is actually to do with the fact that I'm hungry, is something that might kill me. And so they behave in ways that reflect the fact that this is a very serious event as far as they're concerned. And it's through repetition and through the kind of care that they receive that they begin to realize, in that sense, begin to learn about the fact that things happen according to routines, to things happening via habit and practice. Now, those are extremely important. They're the basis of various things in conceptual development. The idea of arithmetic comes from regularity. When something happens more than once, then you can conceive of the idea that there is something that is more than once. And then when it happens over time, it becomes more predictable, so that you can become more comfortable with the idea that something is going to happen at a certain time, so that the pain you have in your tummy isn't going to kill you, but it is uncomfortable. And by having that feed, that parent, in that sense, is demonstrating that they understand the nature of your need and they can meet it, so that you can feel more secure. But of course, it's also important from a parent's point of view, because there isn't such a thing called perfection, that we're able to get things wrong. And I guess in reality, there is no right or wrong. There is simply more or less helpful. So, which is also extremely important to recognize. Because if we were perfect as parents, then we'd probably have very vulnerable children, because they wouldn't learn about anger, jealousy, envy, the difficult feelings that we have to try and manage. And in part of early infancy is part of acquiring a form of continence, emotional continence, that goes alongside achieving a measure of physical continence. And that's evident particularly for those toddlers when they are exploring their will, their agency, which is extremely important, but for parents can be very objectionable at times. But it's important in that sense that learning about relationships is what's happening through that behavior. And the repetition in that sense is really repeating a similar lesson. Nothing in that sense is lost. And it's not necessarily a sign of being disrespectful if you don't comply. If you're exploring the properties of a relationship, then you may need to repeat things so that you can look at things from different angles. So you may try and play a parent off against one another. That's actually exploring the integrity of the parental relationship, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And change is also very difficult to manage. We don't know what's necessarily coming next. And for some of us, when we get very excited, we can't quite remember what happened before. And that may become much more of a feature as we get older. And that, but from a parent's perspective, then it's most important to keep in mind that things are happening in a very dynamic way, which, of course, in the middle of it, you are very aware of. But it's important in that sense to try to sit back a little bit and reflect on what's going on. And also reflect upon how having a baby also impacts upon the nature of your relationship. Becoming a parent in that sense is a very complicated business, which those that have become parents in that sense will appreciate, and that those that are anticipating becoming parents would do well to, as you say, think about learning more in the antenatal period, so that you can anticipate more and hopefully in that sense manage things more comfortably in the postnatal period, which carries with it very significant challenges in its own right. Very tiny babies in that sense can feel a bit like grenades, that they can go off in your hands, and in which case it can be quite, well, it can be very frightening. And then when we manage to sort of begin to get to know that baby and feel more comfortable with them, they grow, of all things. And then we find that we've got somebody who's slightly different in front of us. And we've just got used to the one that we had. And although the one that's in front of us is really exciting and very nice, then there's a part of us that's also feeling the loss of where did the other one go? And that. So I was just getting to know them, and I thought they were beautiful. But then how can I be sad about the fact that I've got somebody in front of me who has more capacity, so he's engaging and is doing more? But for a parent, then that's a repeated experience. We don't know what's going to come next. To some degree, we share our children's experience of learning and growing. And that's something that we also don't think an awful lot about, which is how we focus a great deal upon children's development, but adults, we tend to lose. But of course, as adults, becoming a parent is part of our emotional development. Forming an adult relationship may signal a resolution of adolescence, or the tasks of adolescence in becoming more independent. And then, of course, we trace our own past development afresh through becoming the experience of a child who's growing and taking us through that experience in a different kind of way, in a kind of third-hand way. But it also means that we're drawing upon experience as we go. And some of that experience may be problematic. And as parents, we might think that there are some things that we're definitely consciously going to choose not to do with our children. But then in contingent moments, when a child questions us through their behaviour in ways that mean that we don't have the luxury of time to be able to think, then we may, well, we have no real choice really but to draw upon that experience of growing up. And it's at those points that we might sort of say to ourselves, my goodness, I think that's my mother speaking there, or my goodness, that's my dad. What am I doing? Those are very ordinary things, but it's also part of our own emotional development in thinking about what our children are teaching us. And it's important for us to be in a position where we can learn from our children. As much as our children need to learn from us.
I'm just laughing here because we're here, Infant Mental Health Week, doing a show highlighting infant mental health, and we're actually talking about adults, talking about the parents and the adult relationship, and how, as you mentioned, that we often, and I even see this in younger people, that when they grow up, and I did it myself, you know, I will never do that, or I never say what my mother said or my father said. And then in that situation, when you're pushed and you have never experienced this before, and you haven't had any teaching or thinking around this area, and as you say, you just refer back to what you know or what was done to you and go straight into that. And I know a lot of our parents actually come to us with those issues, that they refer back to what their parents teach them, and rather than thinking things through. And this is why we're trying to change and educate people. So it's interesting that on Infant Mental Health Week here, we're talking a lot about adults and how we can prepare adults better to be parents, and to have that emotional awareness for their own relationships, which grows, as you say. And also what you got me thinking about is how much adults at times really want to try and mold that baby or that child to be a miniature them, and maybe to lead the life that they didn't have, or the opportunities that they didn't have, to excel in those opportunities. And they want them to live their lives, really, but it's their child. It's their child. It's a totally different
Absolutely.
person. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, it is Infant Mental Health Awareness Week. But I think that was part of my concern in quoting Donald Winnicott, was to bring to light the fact that infants depend, you know, essentially upon parents. So that Infant Mental Health Awareness Week is also as much about parents as it is about the babies. But you're quite right in that observation that to some degree as parents we always live a little vicariously, and that's very natural as well. But it can become a preoccupation, as you suggest, that we want our children in that sense to be able to have what we didn't have. But if we focus upon that a little too concretely, if we're being a little too insistent, then to some degree we diminish the opportunity for the children to learn from us, because they need to explore. And for that exploration, they need us to be open and flexible to some degree. And whilst in that sense our aspirations are something that we hold very dear, we often come into conflict with children in that sense when either they behave in ways that we don't approve of, or if they choose directions or they appear to be developing in ways that are actually divergent with our own experience. I think it's also important to think about gender. As a man, some people may think, well, it is a bit strange that you're interested in babies. And I have to say that from my career perspective, then I started initially working with adolescents, and I found myself working backwards, thinking about therapeutic potency, that actually early intervention is the most effective way of dealing with adversity. And so that meant that I became more interested in infants. And then in the 1990s, I think it was referred to as the decade of the baby brain, as technology in that sense allowed much more in the way of insight into things. And it was possible to integrate an awful lot of what had been observed behaviourally and from development from different perspectives alongside neuroscience as it was catching up. And I think that I think I've just lost my thread there, Kathleen.
No problem at all. And what I'm thinking there as you're talking, and we're coming with only another few minutes left of the show, would you believe, and we're in the last 2-3 minutes now, is that we need to come back to this, because we have Father Mental Health Day coming up on the 25th of June. And I was talking to one of our trainers who's also a counsellor. He's also an imam. He's very much into attachment like yourself, indeed, and bonding. And he was talking about from Islamic points of view, concepts there. And before the show, you were talking a bit about respect, and I think we need to come back and do another show, actually a bit later on, about this for Father's Mental Health Day, and try and incorporate both together. So I wonder, would
Yes.
you be able to do that? Because I know today we've only another couple of minutes left.
Yes, I'd love an opportunity to be able to come back. It's fascinating, and fathers are extremely important, and it is really important for fathers to take as much of a role as they can. The infant parent experience is extremely intense, and the role of the father in that sense is vital in it. We often, well, because we don't actually have a very active role at the outset, then it can have quite a disabling impact upon us, because in that sense it's as if all of the action is going on in the other relationship. Mm-hmm. However, it's not exclusively in that relationship, and we have a very important role in supporting mum in managing the intensity of the baby, and also to some degree helping the baby manage the intensity of the relationship with mum. And fathers in that sense are extremely important from that regulatory kind of perspective, but it's not often appreciated.
It's not, and I'm afraid we're going to have to start coming to an end. And lots of wonderful messages came out of this, and the importance of relationships, the importance of fathers, the importance of parents in Mental Health Week. So we've got lots of good messages there. Is there any one key thing you'd like to say before we end today? We're in the last minute.
I think the most important thing is to try to enjoy the experience as much as possible. Babies are brilliant. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a wonderful message to get across, indeed, to enjoy your babies, enjoy your children. They're all very different, but they are brilliant. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I really appreciate you coming on as the show today. It's wonderful. We will definitely have you back. We will organise something so we can do something for Father's Mental Health Day. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. It was great having you tune in. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you have any questions, do either get in contact with Unity FM or with Approachable Parenting, and we will try and answer those questions for you. Have a good